got to talk about the Levi's DM, of course. Ultimately ended up selling your company for $400 million.
A little over
400 million.
There will be people who will come after you for some of the craziest things. Took $6 million worth of cancellations in 1 week. The next year we doubled, and then the next year we doubled.
Was it weird to go from 18 and a half years of grinding to retired? I imagine that's the weirdest transition.
I think when you are so excited about working on your brand, you think other people are going to be, and they're selling you.
One thing I totally regret is that I was so heads down and focused in the business. I never talked to anybody. I just did it my way.
Are there any tips that you can tell us in building a business of that size profitably, like to stay lean? Michelle, we're so excited to have you on the podcast finally.
Yay. It's so nice to be here. I'm so glad we were able to work it out.
You know I'm obsessed with your story, but we want to tell the audience, like, start to finish. So let's start with, what were you doing before Beyond Yoga?
Before Beyond Yoga, I was living in New York, and before, I'm going to give you my full background. So I grew up in Maryland. My dad was an entrepreneur, so I kind of got the entrepreneurial bug from watching him build and grow his business. But I also saw him lose his business, which I think really shaped who I am as a leader. And I don't think I'm quite as open to risk as most entrepreneurs, because I have really seen the other side of it and how bad things can go. But also when I was growing up, my mom was like the stay-at-home mom who was with me, and she's amazing and smart and beautiful, but she definitely suffered from body image issues, and just didn't realize how great she was, and was always comparing herself to all of these very skinny, small women, and just I felt like devaluing how great she was. And so there was a lot of diet culture and a lot of things. And so all of that very much shaped who I am, and the fact that I really wanted to create a company that was about body positivity and feeling good in your skin. Then also, after I ended up going to the University of Florida for college, best college ever. And I studied graphic design. And then when I graduated, I moved to New York, and I worked at People magazine and Harper's Bazaar. And when I was at People, I also saw all of the photoshopping that was happening for, you think you're seeing these candid photos of celebrities, and it's really this person's writing in and being like, can you elongate my legs? Can you fix this photo of me? And they do those things, or at least they did. I'm talking 20 plus years ago. So anyways, I just saw this photoshopping, and I was like, how are women supposed to feel good about themselves? And then that in conjunction with everything I saw my mom and different friends throughout life go through, I was like, we need to have a different take on how we're showing women what beauty is. And so fast forward, moved to LA, created Beyond Yoga, and the whole point behind Beyond Yoga was all about inclusivity, body positivity. We had a plan. We would never Photoshop a woman's body. So we really tried to pick women who, just showed that beauty exists in all different shapes, sizes, ages, ethnicities. It's not a one-size-fits-all situation. So
you moved to LA, and you have this idea for what you want to show, but how did it become an activewear line?
So when I moved to LA, I was actually focused on something else. When I was in New York, I was working on I guess it was my first entrepreneurial endeavor. It was called Unsweetened. And I would draw women, and I would draw them as they are. And I called it, I said it was the non-sugar-coated version of them. And then I'd put them on T-shirts, and people would buy these T-shirts. It was really weird. I sold them when I was working at People Magazine. And I had this, it started out because I was doing it for a friend for her birthday because she had everything and I was making no money working at People, living in New York, trying to just survive. And I was like, what am I going to get Lauren for her birthday? So I drew her. And then I started drawing all of my friends, and that became like the birthday present that I gave everybody.
Funny.
And then people started asking me, they were like, oh, your friend, you know, Rachel looks like my friend such and such. Could I get one of those? And so I started selling them. And then I started making more of them and selling them at like, not real trade shows, but like, I guess I did do some real trade shows. And so like holiday bazaars, and then I did the New York gift show. And then I decided to move to LA. Well, I actually decided to move to San Diego, but I came up to LA for the LA gift show, and I was selling unsweetened there. And I ended up meeting a guy, his name is Brad, and he ended up, his mom was a sales rep, and he was like, oh, my mom should rep your line. And I didn't even know what a sales rep was at that point. And I was like, tell me more about this. And then when I ended up moving to LA, I called him to see if, you know, wanted to hang out or if he knew anybody who needed a designer or anything. And then he ended up introducing me to the woman who became my business partner, Jody. And she was a yoga instructor who had the idea for Beyond Yoga. You know, at first I thought that I was going to work with her and help her with her idea, and I was going to focus on unsweetened. And it's really funny because one of the first days I remember hearing her on the phone with the designer, and she was getting frustrated, and she was like, you know, the sketch isn't turning out the way I want. And I was like, send me the sketch. I was like, you know, I do this, I illustrate. And so she was like, oh. So she sent it to me, and then that night I was a big nerd, and I went home and I like fixed the sketch the way she wanted, but then I had all of these ideas of things that would be cool. And so then I sent that back to her, and she called me the next morning, and she was like, our relationship is about to change. And basically I designed like all of the collections kind of from that point forward with the design team ended up reporting into me, but I started and I did like all of our initial sketches, and then I don't know.
So you basically like launched right then. You were like, we're launching. But you didn't? Did you have a product yet, or just the sketches?
We just had the sketches, and we had a few samples, and then at that point, we were still picking colors, but we had, I think she had already picked the initial fabric, which we started with, which was called Supplex. I think when we started, we had Supplex, Tactile, and Pima Cotton, and I can't remember what was selected at that point. But I do remember our first collection, we had these ridiculous Tactile balloon shorts. And we offered them in orange, and they were so way too fashion forward for what like the world was ready for, but they're actually really cute. Wish I still had them.
And at this point, are you her employee?
At that point, I think I was just like freelance working with her.
But there was no like co-founder discussion.
No, not at that point. And nothing had even happened at that point.
I
You know,
mean,
there was
it's such an important lesson still in like being proactive and the opportunities that come from that.
Yeah.
You know, most people would have just done the single job you were asked to do.
You know, it's funny. I feel like that was the main thing that just kept happening. Like I just kept taking on more and more responsibility. I was like, oh, what are you doing there? What do we need to do? And I just started doing things. And like I taught myself so many parts of the business that were really fun. Like I didn't know that I was teaching myself merchandising, or I didn't know that I was doing forecasting, but I was like, oh, it looks like we're ordering like these things and it's coming in this ratio. If we've got to figure out how much fabric we need. And I just started building spreadsheets and, you know, figuring it out. And yeah, now I look back and I'm like, oh, there are people who, you know, have gone to school and learned how to be, you know, to forecast and plan. And eventually I was lucky enough to have people who did that full time on my team. But in the beginning, I just jumped in and did it.
If you've ever thought about starting a company or you're already in it and figuring things out as you go, I wrote Bootstrap Empire for you. It's the real story of how we built Bala from a scrappy side hustle into a global brand. without a traditional playbook or unlimited capital. This book has the lessons and advice I wish I had from day one. Think of it as your mentor in a book format. Bootstrap Empire is out now and available on Amazon, Walmart, Target, Barnes & Noble, and more. If you're building something from scratch, this one's for you. Visit bootstrap-empire.com to learn more. And so you guys launched, what year is this when you?
2005 is when we met, and we launched in 2006.
And was it wholesale to start?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And so at what point, you start launching, was it very a slow crawl? Was there a big moment where sales blew up? What was that trajectory like?
It was a slow, steady growth story. I look back and the first year we were in business, I think we were pretty successful. We did $1 million in sales the first year, which I think is pretty good.
That doesn't feel like a slow crawl to me.
No, especially without D2C.
Yeah, no, that didn't even exist at that point.
Exactly.
But then the next year we doubled, and then the next year we doubled, and then I feel like around that time there was a financial crisis, and we actually lost. We were moved backwards, and comparing year over year, we had gone backwards $1 million, and that was really concerning and scary. And then I think that that made me look at a lot of the details that sometimes when you're successful right off the bat, you don't pay attention to all of the little things, and sometimes success can kind of blur some of the important details. And so I think that it was really helpful, actually, because when we did have this one down year, and I think it was the only down year we ever had in the history of the company, but it made me really dig into all of the numbers that I wasn't paying as close of attention to before. And I think that trained me to be a lot more diligent about things, and I think that set us up for a better foundation moving forward.
It's the same when you raise money. You're given large sums of money, and you aren't running it like a business. And I learned how to run my business after the money ran out. 5 years in. But in the beginning, it's I didn't know how to run a business, truly.
It's so interesting, and it's also, I don't know if I mentioned, but we didn't raise money. So we were bootstrapped from the time we started until we sold. 16 and a half years later, we never raised any money.
That's insane, especially in a crowded athleisure category.
Yeah, and we were also competing against so many people that had raised money.
How did you stand out and keep up with Lulu and Aloe and all these huge brands at the time that were paving the way? How did
Aloe didn't exist.
How did you keep? Well, okay, so tell us about that. But how did you keep up with Lulu and whoever else was there at the time?
Yeah, I never looked at it like I was keeping up with these guys. I looked at it like Lulu was super impressive, right? And it was this. I think of them as a older sister or something who you look up to, but I never thought, oh, we're gonna be that one day. Was very impressed with the fact that they were able to sell leggings at that price point, and I think that really did pave the way, because before that, I think people thought would never have paid $100 for a pair of leggings, but Lulu almost made it a thing, and so that was helpful. For sure. I'm trying to think, at the time, I think there was hardtail was really big, and they were cotton. And so, cotton it'll stretch out when it gets wet. And so I think people weren't having the best user experience. And then Lulu was it fit so differently. I consider myself a petite person, and when I would go into the Lulu store, I felt like the clothing was so restrictive, and I just didn't when even the sizing, I think I was a 6 or an 8, and I was I'm not a 6 or an 8 in anything. This is odd, and so it made me feel uncomfortable when I put that clothing on. So what we wanted to create was something that made you feel amazing the moment you put the clothing on, that you could leave on all day, whether you're working out or not, and you could put it on in the morning and then feel comfortable enough that like if your day allowed and you found a moment to go work out, great. And if you didn't, you were still comfortable in your clothes.
Do you feel like people felt that? Is that there was like a natural?
I think that they did. I think that the fit and how much attention we put into like how the clothing makes you feel, the fabrics that we chose, the softness, the design intention. It was never to like be overly sexy. It was to be comfortable but look good and focus on like, you know, I used to always say that like our fabrics were just thick enough that they smoothed you out so you didn't see the cellulite, but it wasn't tight enough to like make you feel restricted. And I just think it makes you feel good. And like they're clothing that you just want to wear all day and, you know, rub your hands over your legs. Like it's comfort. And I think people really liked that. And then we also, you know, we started out, as I said, in wholesale. And so I think that was a really great way to get people to know who we were. I remember, you know, so we started off with all of these wholesale reps, and basically we worked with different showrooms, and they worked on a commission structure because we didn't have the money to like go out and just hire a sales team. And they had relationships with, you know, different yoga studios and, you know, mom and pop boutiques and whatnot. And so that really helped us get our name out there, and in a very authentic way. Like we were Beyond Yoga and we were at Yoga Works and we were at, you know, your local studio. People started to see it. And then down the road, we were able to get into some of the department stores. So we would be in Nordstrom and Bloomingdale's, and people started to like see, oh, I see it here. I see it here. And then it like builds this trust. And then we started going into like the spas and the resorts. So you'd see it when you're on vacation at like this luxury place. And you're like, oh, I recognize that. And it kind of just builds that consumer confidence. But also I remember that Lulu decided to pull out of wholesale. And so they were originally doing the same strategy. And then they decided they were going to go only, you know, focus on their stores. And so that left a huge opportunity for us, and we took it.
And so you always talk about wholesale too as a huge part of your strategy, but at a certain point you did launch e-com.
Yes.
And I've heard you say that you were actually able to acquire a customer profitably, and you kind of figured out that model too. So how did you figure out the e-com model as well?
Okay, so our e-commerce came so much later. I remember our first website that we built was, this is going to make me sound so old, but it was in Flash. And at first...
Yeah, that's first websites.
Yeah.
That just means you were early.
We were early. And I remember having conversations and, you know, making sure that wholesale was prioritized first. We wouldn't even offer the same product on our, like if we had something on our website or that we had sold to wholesale, we left a certain amount available for them to fill in. And then I would put it on our website like 6 months later. Like I wanted wholesale to be so protected. And that mentality, I think, stuck with me for a very long time, even though we did build our direct-to-consumer business. And, it, you know, obviously it was a huge part of our business. But I still, you know, always prioritize those wholesale relationships and really valued them. And I think a lot of companies I've heard from my wholesale partners have said like, oh, well, you know, the brands tend to, once they open their own stores, they tend to focus only on that. Or once they have their website, they want to focus on that and they'll fill those orders before they'll fill wholesale. And I knew that my buyers were taking a risk with me. I knew my buyers depended on their bonuses, and success was all about how well we sold through. And if I didn't deliver, that was going to make them look bad. So I always prioritized my wholesale relationships first and foremost before direct to consumer. But direct to consumer is a huge part of business. And, you know, especially after, I think it was during COVID when we realized like we took like $6 million worth of cancellations in 1 week from wholesale. And I ended up, that also happened to be a time when direct-to-consumer really started to grow. I mean, it was definitely a large part of our business before, but it was the first time in the history of the business that direct-to-consumer eclipsed wholesale. And that was 2020.
Was there a year where you just like skyrocketed in sales, or was it really just steady growth? Because I know
It was pretty steady growth.
the whole time.
The whole time. I mean, we had double-digit growth most years.
But profitably.
But profitably. And when I say profitably, it wasn't gangbuster profitably. We took everything that we made and put it back into the business. And so, the goal was pretty much to break even or to be a little bit profitable because we had plans to grow. But we were running the business profitably to break even.
Are there any tips that you can tell us, like in building a business of that size profitably, like to stay lean, but also while thinking about growth? Like what
You
tips?
have to stay lean. I am shocked so one of the things I do now is I talk to female founders and I try to give of my time and just try to help other people who've been on this journey. Because one thing I totally regret is that I was so heads down and focused in the business. I never talked to anybody. And I feel like there's so many amazing people, especially in Los Angeles, who have built incredible apparel companies. And I just did it my way. And so I want to help other people not make some of the same mistakes. But I think one of the most important things is to stay lean and not to have too much assortment. I feel like people get real crazy about feeling like you have to be everything to everyone and diversifying their product line so much so that they can, fulfill everybody's need. And it's like you really need to build that relationship with the customer first and have that trust. And you want every product that you put out to be as amazing as your hero product. And so if that means you can only launch one new thing per year, then launch one thing. If you can't be as great with that new product, don't launch it. It just doesn't matter, but you don't want someone to come to your website and find this new thing that you put out and it's not as good and that's their one experience with your brand and then that's it.
Yeah.
People won't come back.
So when you say stay lean, do you mean team-wise or just like across the board stay lean, ad spend, like everything?
Across the board. I think people are quick to bring on business partners and give up their equity. I think they don't realize how your equity is the most important thing you have. And once you give it away, it is very difficult to get back. I talk to people all of the time who are struggling with this. And I think a lot of people, start off and they're like, oh, I'm going to be business partners with somebody and I'm going to do 50-50. And I don't think that everybody thinks through all of those details of what are those requirements and what are the tough conversations that's going to, come down the road. My husband was just telling me about a conversation he had with two of our friends who are going into business together. And he was like, I'm going to just sit down and talk to you and remind you of all the things that can go wrong that you guys should talk about right now before you get into this, because it can ruin your relationship. And there's so many different avenues ways can go. And I've talked to so many business owners who have just, you start a company and you don't think about where you're going to be 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road. Maybe somebody wants to move. So maybe you're single when you do this, and then somebody gets married, and then you guys have families, and then life takes you in different directions, and you need to think through and openly talk about what's going to happen if you decide you want to move, or you decide you're not going to be able to, participate to this level. Do you still retain all of that equity? And how do we, maybe I need to bring somebody else on, but you have this equity and I have this equity and you're the one who's going to leave. Maybe I need to be able to sell your equity, and I need, if you're not going to uphold this side of it, there's a lot to think about.
It's good to talk about those scenarios.
How do you advise people then who are bootstrapping have a limited skill set, because not everybody can do everything, right? And need to bring people on but don't have the funds?
Well, I think there are a lot of people who are willing to help, and a lot of people who are willing to, take small equity positions in order to share their expertise. And I say, look for those people. It is hard, but I think that obviously you have to have a little bit to give, whether it's, time, whether it's product, whether it's equity, but I don't recommend hiring people right off the bat. And I do feel like sometimes I talk to founders and I'm shocked by how many people they have on their payroll. And then I want to see how they're growing and what their profitability is. And it seems like, their hiring is outpacing what they're building.
Yeah.
And that can be a pitfall. And I think a lot of founders feel very responsible for the people who helped them early on. But you also, and this was a very hard lesson for me to learn, but your needs and the team that you have, it changes as your company evolves. And you need to evolve as a leader, and you have to understand that your team is going to evolve too.
Do you have any rules of thumb that you went by in terms of like payroll to revenue ratio? I think you were like around 60 employees or maybe more whenever you sold, which we'll talk about. But do you have any rules of thumb that you went by?
I don't have any hard and fast rules, but I just always, we always modeled everything out, and I would put this payroll in, and you look at people and you're like, is this a cost generator? Is it a revenue generator? Like, what is this, and what can we get by with until, I would always bring on another salesperson. I felt like that was guaranteed to grow top line and would pay for itself. But you have to be careful when it comes to, all right, how many people can I have on this accounting team, and how many people can I have in product development? Like, you have to be strategic about it, and you have to stretch a dollar.
For sure.
Yeah, I made the same mistake of like bulking up ops with cost before bulking up sales or marketing.
And I hear a lot of people say, oh, I need to bring on a CFO.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why? Why are you planning on doing some mergers and acquisitions? Because really a skilled accountant, and you can never take your eye off of that, but people end up paying so much for a CFO, and they can't afford it. I remember there was a guy who we thought about bringing on as a CFO, and I love him dearly. His name is Michael Rosen. I think he used to be at Velvet and Michael Stars, but he's just looked at us and he was like, "You can't afford me." And I so appreciate the honesty. And he was like, "This doesn't make sense." And he's like, "I'm gonna like introduce you to a couple people that would make sense for you at this point in your journey.
Yeah.
But you can't afford me." And I would be, negligent. Like it would be wrong for him to have taken the job. And, I really appreciate that. And I think a lot of people get suckered into things like that.
Easily. And I think it's hard when you're building you just don't know where the revenue unlock obviously makes sense from like a sales team. But other than that, you're like a growth team, ops team, like where is the revenue unlock? So it's kind of hard, and you think maybe a C-suite makes sense, but maybe it's not the right time.
It's a good point with advisors as well, like know what you want from them. Because I think when you are so excited about working on your brand, you think other people are going to be, and they're selling you. And then it materializes that they don't actually know how to help you or how to be brought in or what their expectation is, and you've given away a ton of equity, and you never verbalize what your expectation of them was.
Being clear with your expectations across the board is the most important thing you can do.
Yeah.
Clear with your expectations of your team, with your partners, with your vendors, and having everything in writing. I think that having a good lawyer is probably the most important thing you can do. I will say that when it comes to employment law, like there are just always, no matter how wonderful of a business person you are, no matter how good your intentions are towards your team, there will be people who will come after you for some of the craziest things, and you need to protect yourself. And a good lawyer who can help you with that is worth their weight in gold. And the amount of times that our favorite employment lawyer was Wendy Lane, and anything I was about to do, I just remember Jesse, my husband and eventual business partner, he would be like, call Wendy, just check with Wendy, shoot her an email. And that saved me so many times. So, good lawyer.
Yeah, I remember. I think you might have connected us to it. Okay, so we got to talk about the Levi's DM, of course. You ultimately ended up selling your company for $400 million.
A little over
400 million. Levi's just DM'd you on LinkedIn. So tell us about that moment and everything thereafter.
So it's pretty crazy because I am not that great at LinkedIn in general. And I do not know why I saw this one email, but I got an email and it was from somebody at Levi's, and they said, we're interested in talking about a potential partnership, collaboration, and give me a call. And so I was like, that can't be. But I actually had a cousin who worked at Levi's, and I was like, is this a real person? And she was like, yeah, real person. And I was like,
what
okay.
team was it?
It was, I'm trying to remember what her exact title was, because the way she said it was about a potential collaboration, but then she was brought on for business development, and like
I was like, is it marketing or
it was
it
not
M&A?
marketing?
Yeah.
And it, and we were the first acquisition that Levi's ever made. I still think we're the only. I mean, I haven't checked exactly what they're up to these days, but we are the first company that they ever acquired. So my mind didn't go there. It wasn't like, oh, we heard from VF Corp or something like that. Like it was, then, so we ended up meeting. I had a call with the woman from Levi's, and we talked about our brand synergies and how much we just overlapped. And first I thought we were going to do a product collab, and I was really excited about it. And then after this amazing phone call that lasted for like over an hour, and I think we were talking on Black Friday, which was really funny because we're like the only two people
willing to take calls.
Exactly. But we had this great call, and then she was like, great, I'd love to set up a phone call for you and the CFO. And I was like, absolutely. And then I was like, that's odd.
Yeah.
That's not a normal second phone call for the CFO of a major company that's publicly traded.
Were you starting to think?
I didn't really let my mind go there, but then I ended up talking to Harmeet, and he was lovely, and we had a wonderful conversation, and he was very candid. He was like, we're interested in a collaboration. We are looking to diversify. They're primarily denim. They're primarily men's, even though they have a healthy women's business, but they're still, male dominant, or at least they were at that point. And they said, we'd love to diversify. I think COVID had been really difficult for the brand because people weren't wearing denim, when they were at home. They were like, we want to learn about it. And my reaction, I really wasn't trying to pitch us, but I just told them, I was like, honestly, you should buy a company. I was like, everybody thinks they can do athleisure. Everybody thinks they can do it, and they can't. And it's really about like having that trust with the consumer. And it's taken us 16 years to build this relationship where people just know Beyond Yoga and they trust it, and they'll buy what we make because they know we're not going to put out anything that isn't amazing. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I've seen too many people try and fail. And I really wasn't trying to sell us. I was just giving him advice, but it turned out to work out okay.
That's crazy.
And then what happens? Like, obviously, it's not like you were looking for an exit. You're not equipped with like lawyers and an M&A team. Like, how do you get the best deal in that instance when you're kind of on the back foot?
We were not looking to exit at that point. We were, we had grown grown a lot. We were very profitable at that moment. I was very excited about what our future potential was. So when they wanted to talk about an acquisition, I don't think I would have done it with anyone else. Like, I think the fact that it was Levi's and I was a little enamored by the brand, and when I thought about what that could mean for Beyond Yoga and for my team and for the longevity of the company, like, that was really exciting. They wanted, because, I mean, this is the way they said it to me. They were like, because we're public, we really don't want anybody to know about this. And when they said that, like, I took it so seriously. Like, I didn't tell my mom. Like, it was like nobody knew what was going on. And they were like, we'd really appreciate if you didn't run a process. I was okay with that because I really didn't want to run a process. But I also knew that exclusivity came with a premium. You know, and so I wasn't hard pressed to sell. It was exciting and it was flattering, but if it didn't happen, we were in a fantastic position at that point. So I didn't feel the pressure, and I feel like that's a good place to negotiate from.
Yeah, feeling like you have nothing to lose.
Yeah, and you're in or out.
Yeah.
Like, it's like the best place. I bet most people are not in that position. So how long from start to finish, like from first DM to like the deals going through, how long did that take? And also, who named that first price? Obviously there's negotiations, but like, who first named the price?
It took less than a year.
Pretty quick for a deal size.
Well, let me think about that. Okay, I had the conversation with them Black Friday, and I think we closed in September of 2021, so less than a year. It also, we weren't running a process. And it was funny because it's not like we had like a deal book or anything like that. We were just, we put together the due diligence that they requested. And I worked with a fantastic lawyer who I feel like, his name is Goody. And I feel like he really helped us through. But basically, Jesse and I navigated the entire process on our own and negotiated the entire deal. And Levi's did put out the first number, and I negotiated. And we did everything over Teams because it was still COVID time. So I think one of the things that was helpful for me was to be able to see my own face, because my husband always teases me that I don't have a very good poker face. So I don't think I looked overly enthusiastic when they threw out their first number.
Wow.
And I think that was helpful.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I want to know what that is. I just have so many questions.
I want to know what that number is.
I know. I want to know. I'm going to ask after this. So any tips for this negotiation process? I like the tip of like poker face, especially if you're a kind, sweet person. Like, that's tough. But any other tips for like, negotiations or hardball in general? It could be selling a company or, negotiating a salary, whatever it is. Like,
Sure.
since you just won that crazy negotiation.
Well, I think one thing that's helpful is not having all of the parties at the table, because everybody wants to be loved, right? You want the people on the other side of the table to be excited about you and working with you. And I remember, I hope I'm allowed to say this, I just remember when I got their first offer, I just said, I don't even know if I could bring that to my business partner. If we were all sitting at the table, it would have been different.
Yeah.
But being able to just, it's a little bit of that like good cop, bad cop situation. So I think that's helpful. I think it's helpful even in business. Like, not everybody, like, when you're the CEO and you're running the day-to-day and you're like building this team and you love your team, and then people are coming to you and they're asking for things and you want to give them everything, but you can't. Sometimes it's nice to have a heavy that isn't you, and it's like, I've got to bring that to the board. Maybe you don't have a board, but you have your advisors. I'm going to need to get, buy-in from this, that, and the other, because it's hard when you want to make people happy, but it's not the right business move to always just be like, no. Okay, now let's go back to work.
Yeah, it's good to have a bad cop.
That's a good piece of advice.
You use me all the time. You're like, Lana won't let me.
Lana, she won't do it for that price. I like that advice, though. It's really good. I got to bring it to the board.
Well, I did have a board, and I did have to bring it
You
to
had
the
to bring
board.
it to the board. Wow. So were you ever 16 years with, that is your baby. Were you ever conflicted? And there was that moment where you had to leave the company. Like, was it sad to say goodbye, or did you feel like it was just time?
So I was definitely conflicted. The idea of selling the company in general just was hard. But I think one of the things that has always served me is my optimism and a little bit of, I always say this word wrong, but my naivete. Like, I really went into it believing all of the best things that could happen. And so that helped me get past myself and my fears. And I was really able to focus on what was going to happen for my team. And the idea of thinking about, just the longevity that working with a company like Levi's would bring, but then the opportunities that it would bring for the people my team was primarily women, so 90% female. So, for all of the people who took the chance on me and Beyond Yoga, bringing them into the Levi's organization wouldn't just give them the opportunity to grow within Beyond, but it would also give them the opportunity to grow within Levi's and have that on their resume, which I thought was fantastic. And then when it was time to leave, I really did not think I was ever going to leave. So I didn't leave until 18 and a half years in. So I stayed on. I joined the executive leadership team at Levi Strauss, and I got to help shape what was going on at Levi's, which was an amazing honor and incredible opportunity. But I got to really see what was going on, like how public companies work and how different it is from a bootstrapped startup. At some point, the decisions that you would make as a bootstrapped individual are not the same as what a larger organization is going to do. Sometimes it's harder to sit there and go along with something that feels, even if it's right for the company, doesn't feel right for you as an individual. And it's not the way you would do it, but you understand it's not yours anymore. And it took me a while. Even once we sold, I didn't really understand that it wasn't my company. And I would just go and I would be like, oh, well, we can't do this because of this. And, like silly things. But they were like, oh, we need to change you off of Gmail. And I was like, oh, no, we built the whole company on, Google Drives. And I have all of this information. We can't change. And I still thought it was my choice. And, they were very kind and we had great conversations, but ultimately it wasn't my choice anymore. And that was difficult, just little things like that. That may sound so trivial to everybody else, but for me, I was like, what do you mean? And
You're gonna go to Microsoft?
But the amount of information that was lost during that transfer, it still hurts my soul.
Yeah. All of a sudden you had a boss, basically.
Oh, yeah.
Which is wild.
Yeah.
But was it weird to go from 18 and a half years of grinding to retired? I imagine that's the weirdest transition.
So weird. The day I woke up afterwards, so I got some good advice. Somebody told me, when you retire, wake up on vacation. And so I said to Jesse, I was like, we got to go. And the very last day, we had a goodbye party at work, and then I got on a plane and we went to Cabo. We went to my favorite place. And I remember the next morning waking up, and I think actually I sent my goodbye note to the team from Cabo. And then the next morning I woke up and it was beautiful and sunshiny and we were on the beach and it was this lovely, very quiet day. But in LA, it was raining, and I feel like if I had woken up in LA with the rain, even though it never rains in LA, it did that day. It actually rained that whole week. And I think that would have depressed me to no end. And I don't know. It was weird because it was so quiet, and all of the sudden, my inbox, which usually was flooded, was completely silent. And I was like, I wanted to reach out to my team and be like, "How's it going?" But then I realized, like, the things I thought the day before felt so silly the day after. Like, I was like, that makes no sense. You can't call them today. You need to give them space. You need to leave them alone. You need to, like, let them bond with their new leader. And, like, what is the new CEO going to feel if they hear that you're checking in on everybody? Like, that's not the vibe I wanted to portray. So, but then I was like, are people going to feel like I abandoned them? And, like, I had so much
That's quite complicated. I can
inner
imagine.
turmoil.
Yeah, that is quite complicated. You had to go through that too. So looking back, I mean, you had the dream of dreams, the wild success, but looking back, is there anything you would have done differently?
I am so grateful for how things worked out. So, like, I'm just going to, like, take it and be grateful. But one of the things that I didn't do when I was at Beyond Yoga was talk about myself, tell my story. I was so behind the scenes. I never had a personal Instagram or anything like that. I think that was a little silly. And I didn't realize it until after. And people had told me all along, but I didn't listen to them. I was like, no, I'm really shy. I'm behind the scenes. I don't want to. But I didn't realize that until people know who I am, I can't share my story and help others the way I want to. And so all of a sudden I had people who were like, I'm, going to leave Beyond Yoga. Can you help me find another job? And I was like, oh, well, sure, I'll reach out. And I was writing from my personal email address that's like just a weird bunch of letters that doesn't say, like, Michelle Wahler.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I've got to, people need to know who I am. And so then I started building that and started coming on podcasts and started, I created a public Instagram, Michelle.Wahler, but, like, nobody knew who I was. And so I feel like I could do a lot more good for people now that I have told my story and can help and connect to people.
For sure.
There's a lot about focusing whilst you're in as well, though, which I think is really
I
hard
agree.
for people who
Yeah.
have to do both. It's like, what is your priority? Like, your
So
personal
true.
brand or running your business? And they're both very time-consuming things.
So true. And that's why I say, like, I'm so grateful for the way it turned out. And if I had been focused on me and building a personal brand during that time, I probably wouldn't have gotten as far as I did. So it's totally a valid point. And then I also, as I try to think about, like, what I'm going to do next, and I am so excited about supporting women and supporting female entrepreneurs, and that has been my focus for the last 2 years since I left Beyond. And sometimes I'm like, I could have done so much more with the heft of Beyond Yoga and with the force of Levi's if I had been thinking about that when I was there. And we did things, don't get me wrong. We did great things together. But the things I would do now, I'm like, darn. And then sometimes I think about building another brand just so I can do that. And then I'm like, wait, does that make sense? And
You're
so,
like-
Do you think you'll ever start something again?
I think I will.
Yeah.
I think it would be hard for me not to. But I was given some very good advice right away. My friend Ellen took me out to lunch, and we weren't friends at the time, but we were like, knew each other. But she asked me to go to lunch. She's one of the founders of Mendocino Farms, and she exited. And she was like, let me tell you what you're about to go through. And she was like, everybody is going to reach out to you. Everybody is going to want to hear what you think about everything. They're going to want you to invest in everything. They're going to want you on their board. They're going to want you to be an advisor. You only have so much time. So you need to really pick and choose. Based on that conversation, I just made a commitment to myself that I wasn't going to say yes to anything substantial for a full year. And now we're at year 2, and I'm still holding true to that because it's been such a journey to decompress. And it's also such a joy to have the control of your life back. Like, I didn't realize I didn't have control of my life because I was a founder and I thought, oh, I can do what I want. But really, you are so beholden to your brand and to your company. And I didn't realize just how nice it is to be able to choose your busy and to decide where to put your time. And I think a lot of people, when you are so busy and then you go to a place of like extreme quiet, want to just get back to that busy. And it takes a minute to really figure out where you want to put your time.
Yeah, it's scary. The quiet the next day is like pretty terrifying.
But it doesn't stay quiet long.
Yeah.
It really doesn't.
Especially if you have 2 kids at home.
Exactly. I honestly feel more fulfilled now than I did through all those years. And I loved running Beyond Yoga, and I loved my team and spending time with them. But it is great. You know, I did a lot of repetitive things, and I didn't even realize how repetitive it was until I was out of it. And it's nice now, like, working with so many different brands and talking to so many different people, like hearing their stories and hearing their challenges and getting to jump in and just connect them with different people and help, and then like move on. You know, it's nice, and it's diversified, and it's refreshing, and it keeps me really engaged. So
I love that. That sounds fun. Do you have a favorite e-com tool or Shopify tool in general that you remember that you lived by?
I loved Shopify, and I loved looking at my dashboard every day.
I feel like you were a daily Shopify girl.
I was, and I really liked looking at all of the data. And I think there's so much value in, you know, seeing what, you know, the reviews that you get, the good, the bad, the ugly. Like, I think it's great to share those good reviews with your team, but I also think it's really important to share the bad ones. And I think as a founder, you can't get too far removed from it. I spent too much time looking at the sales, not enough time looking at the reviews. And so I think that is where I would tell founders to spend their time. Like, the sale is happening whether you're looking at it or not. And there was a point where I had every sale coming to my inbox, and I just loved seeing them come in from the website, and I had to stop that because it was total insanity.
I used to have mine on my Apple Watch.
And
That's
like,
absurd. That's crazy.
But it's like
but that's the beginning. It's not like I was getting an order every minute, you know, like I was like 2 orders a day, you know, like at launch. But
it's like a dopamine hit, and it can get addictive. And I had to be like, oh my gosh, during Black Friday, I had to be like, all right, I will only look once per hour.
Wow.
I was getting real crazy.
Yeah, you're crazy. I love it. Okay. Hot takes. What do you got?
Hot takes. I think that you do not need 2 founders to run a business and to start a business. And if you have an idea, I don't think you have to have everything figured out. I think the most important thing is just taking that first step and going. So do it.
Love it.
I definitely agree with that. As a solo founder, thank you so much, Michelle.
Thank you guys.
Such a valuable conversation. I'm so excited for everyone to hear it.
Thank you. This was so fun.
So fun.